Okay, I'm gonna ask you the question, man.
Go ahead.
So part two of that story I told of me leaving Philly, getting on a train at 6 in the morning, just to come to the West Village, just so I can be the first person to read what my rating was. You know, the
We talk
reason
about this
why.
all the time. You have to say this is very important. I don't know how much you listen to this show. We talk about the roots and the microphones all the time. This is
Yeah.
big. This is a big moment.
I've heard a little bit. Yeah, I've heard a
It's
little bit
great.
of it.
And the thing was, I was elated. I was nervous because, we were so left to center and taking a risk on, you know, like this new uncharted live instrumentation territory thing. But yeah, we got the lead review. We got 4 mics. I'm happy. I want to go up and say thank you. I would have been the second person to thank you guys for my 4 mics, but I can't do that right now because I don't know that all hell is breaking loose
There's a
inside.
crisis at the exact same moment. There's a crisis happening at the source.
Literally.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the story that I got was that your partner, Dave Mays, took it upon himself to insert a 3.5 page feature on one of his acts from Boston without the knowledge of you guys knowing it. And basically, as I'm discovering my 4 mics in the magazine, you guys are also subsequently discovering, hey, there's an article here about Almighty RSO. And this is when I first heard the term called conflict of interest. First I was like, well, what's wrong with that? People promote all the time and nepotism. And, Amy and Ursula are trying to explain to me, the newbie of the industry, like there's certain rules that you follow, and there's conflict of interest, and there's, talking to your coworkers and that sort of thing. And of course, I didn't realize that this was a major, like the way that this shit spread like wildfire. Because the thing is like Amy is very connected to every publicist, every da da da, and there's no such thing as a phone thread or social media, whatever. So it's like the second we get back to the Ursula Smith's, it wasn't set to run. Something media. I forget the name of her
I
company.
remember Ursula. I remember Ursula Smith very well. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, it was like they were all on like a war council, like, yo, the source is over they're all walking away. What happened that morning in October of '94? How did you find out that you guys have been compromised by one of your own?
You,
And
Mhm.
the subsequent aftermath of that. I never knew what happened on the inside of those walls that
Yeah.
morning. And of
And
course, I get the announcement that night. The source, as I knew it, is no more. I mean, it
and also we
continued.
saw each other around that time. If you remember, I went to the studio and I met with you. But anyway, to answer your question,
Yes.
just unrelated, I happened to see you shortly after that happened. But you're right. The way you framed it is exactly correct. We every month would have an editorial, a sort of a layout, not just editorial, but the whole sort of map of the whole magazine. Dave and I would primarily just him and I would sit in a room, and we'd have, okay, this month's issue, how many ads did he get? How much editorial do we have? And like, where do these things come together? There would be a sort of like a physical sheet of paper that we would map out the whole issue.
So you have to Tetris the format
Yes,
of, okay, I get it.
the whole
Okay.
magazine, right? So it's like we have, okay, here's the cover feature, here's the secondary feature, here's the record reviews, here's the fashion shoot this month, here's this, whatever. So those pages were marked as ads. So I thought they were ads. I didn't even think twice about it. We often had ads that were, sometimes people would buy like a 2-page spread ad. That was like a normal thing. So I just assumed that that's what it was.
Mhm.
So we go, we finished the issue. As you said, it had Redman on the cover.
Mhm.
Um, And I get a call, I think, from James Bernard, who is, my partner on the editorial side and also a co-owner of the magazine.
Mhm.
Um, Yo, something really fucked up happened, man. You got to come in right now. You got to see this. I'm like, what? Just come here and see. So I come in, and it's the pages that we thought were ads were actually a whole article about this group that Dave had been working with separate from the magazine. He was
Mhm.
managing them basically, but I don't know if that was his official title, but that was basically what he was doing. He was getting them deals. He was cultivating them and trying to make them into stars. And they wanted to jump ahead and get in this, and we were approaching it the same way we approached every artist, in that let it unfold. Let's, we got hundreds of artists every month. Like, let's figure this out, whatever. Instead, this thing happened, and it was a very big violation of our ethics inside the magazine, our friendship. I felt very offended by that act, because it was like, taking away. I was the editor in chief. I was in charge of every article. Like, I didn't write every article, but I made sure I knew about every article that was going in. And this was the first time that I didn't.
Everyone has a code. I get and I understand that. To the public out there,
Would they even know the difference? You're saying, why would
I
they
would have
even?
not known the difference at
No,
all.
I know. Okay, so here's what really happened. If you want to know the sequence of events, my inclination, to be quite honest with you, was the way I always am, which is to handle this privately. I
Mhm.
did not want to go public with this information. My instinct, even though it was really messed up and I was very angry, I would have handled it privately, but something happened that prevented me from doing that. What happened was James Bernard sent out a letter addressed to Dave, using a fax machine. We used to have a fax newsletter called the Weekly Word, and it was
Mhm.
pre-internet. And what it was we had the fax number of literally everyone in the rap industry, radio, records, et cetera.
I
So
got it.
we would send out a weekly, and Miss Info, her first job for us as far as a full-time job was that newsletter. She would actually come in once a week, and she would say, what are the biggest stories? And we talk, and then she'd go and type up that one page sort of like summary. It was kind of
Right.
like a news headlines thing. Like, this is what's happening, so that people on rap shows would be like, this is from the source. We found out that so-and-so is happening. So we had this platform that was still very, kind of like a really industry oriented thing. But
Right. What
so
the
we
source
had,
initially was.
it was still along the lines of initial. And we even had at one point when we tried to do an industry magazine separate from the source, very
Right.
quick, very briefly. But anyway, so we had this platform. So this crisis happens. Dave does this thing. I'm very angry. Everyone's angry. At this point, we had a pretty big staff. Our editorial side was probably about 10 or 12 people. Um, and the business side was probably another 10 or 12 people. We probably had 25 people working there at this time. And so James does something that I thought was a bad idea. I still think it was a bad idea. He goes and he writes this letter to Dave, and he puts it through that Weekly Word fax machine, so that in 1 minute,
The
the
whole world knows.
entire rap industry knows, Dave, how could you do this? Like, you put this article about these guys. We had nothing to do with it. We knew nothing about it. Da 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 da. And all hell breaks loose. I mean, it's like everyone in the industry was calling me. I got the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Village Voice, like all these people, media reporters, like, what happened? Like this, it's kind of like it's two things. It's a hip hop story. It's also a media story. It's a story about turmoil, about media ethics, as you alluded to.
Mhm.
It's about all of these things. And now that James has unfortunately made it public, which again, had I would never have done that. I would have handled it privately, because that was what my instinct was telling me. But now that can no longer be done. Now everyone knows that this thing happened. So what's going to happen next? It's a very tough moment for me and for everyone around. at that time. What really happened was all of the editorial staff had a meeting. I think I went to one of the meetings, but then I think there was another meeting without me, because I was more like
Did you guys have an HR at all?
No, we did have somebody, but it wasn't really a real HR. It was, it was a very, we were
But
kind of
it's like maze in the office as you guys are like
there was
Julius Caesar style, like
it was kind of like that. There was like a giant split, and like half the company went one way and half the company went the other way. And
got it.
when it came down to it, I had to make a very difficult decision, which was, given that now this information was out there, on top of it, the entire editorial staff had voluntarily left their jobs. So now that means there was other people there. There was a guy named Rob Marriott, Carter Harris, Kieran Mayo, Chris Calloway was the art director, Chimo Du, Maddie C. There's a whole lot of people, Reggie Dennis. All of them had said, you know what? We're not even going to work here anymore because Dave needs to go. And I'm like, I hear you, but he's like, he owns a big chunk of this magazine, dude. Like, I mean, what are we going to do about it? And they were like, that's your problem. You figure that out, kind of thing. So I was really isolated.
So they put the pressure on you to, you don't have a staff or anything to vote him out or anything, do you?
Exactly. I was left in a very isolated position because the staff had already decided, we're done. Fuck this. We don't care about, we're not going to work in a place that does this. And I agreed with them. I understood their anger. I was angry too. But also I was a co-owner, as was James and Ed Young. We were all co-owners. So I had two hats on. I had my editorial, hat, which was, and my friendship with him after all these years. Like, how could you do this? And I don't think Dave even realized like how serious, like what he had done. Like, I don't think he even knew the effect. He definitely did not anticipate the reaction. And I was left in a very difficult position of what do I do? So after thinking about it for quite a long time, a few weeks, a couple of very stressful weeks, I decided I want to get bought out. I'm done. It was a hard decision, but once I made it. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to go back to work and pretend everything's okay. I'm going to have to, if I were to go back to work, I'd have to hire a bunch of new people. I'd have to still work under this now, potentially corrupted, structure now, and this and that. And I just made the decision I wanted to get bought out. It took a long time for that deal to get done. It took maybe a year for that whole process to unfold. I remember seeing you right around the time that I made this decision, and you were in a studio somewhere. Do you remember this? Or you
we were probably in Battery Studios, I think.
You were. It was Battery. Yes, correct. And I can't remember why I was sitting with you, but I went up in the studio, and you and I think your engineer were very curious, as was everybody. And I got it. I understood. You were like, what happened? Like, dude, what happened? And I probably told some version of the same story, and
yeah, the source was my Illmatic. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
It's, I mean, look, it's not the way that I would have wanted to leave the source. But if I'm being totally honest, as I think back on those years, I had already begun to feel a sense that I wanted to maybe move on. It wasn't necessarily, definitely not under that circumstance, but there was a period of time about a year before that when I did actually take like a 2-month hiatus. And I went to Philly and tried to write other stuff. I was interested in writing screenplays and other things. So I went and pursued that for a while.
Was there ever a thought that you guys would just collectively start another magazine?
That was a thought. James and Reggie ended up starting XXL about like a few months after that. And then they lasted about a month, and then they had a falling out with that publisher. And then I actually am the one that recommended Elliot Wilson for the job, because the people from Harris Publications, who were also acquaintances or friends of mine, were like, hey man, do you want to come? I was offered the job to go run XXL. And I didn't want to do it, but I proposed that Elliot Wilson would be the best candidate, and he ended up being a great person to do it, obviously. But yeah, that was it, man. I decided to get bought out. Again, I wasn't, I didn't anticipate that would happen, but you know, it was that's what happened. And I accepted that. And we eventually reached a deal for a small 7-figure sum. And that was it.